皆さんまた来てくださってありがとうございます。こちらはマンハッタンニューヨーク木曜日の朝です。ということでね、先週1週間カオスに次ぐカオス、掘って墓穴を掘りまくったバイデンさんなんですけど、今週月曜日頭からまたもやサーカスが始まっておりますもう本当にね笑えてくるんですよ。もうねとにかくね下ろしたいんですね。そのビッグドナーやちょっと知的な民衆党の人たちはとにかく早く下ろしたいんですよ。で一方ジジババのこの今の役職にしがみついているタイプの人たちがバックアップしてるんですね、バイデンを。だからこのサーカスの玉手箱が今いっぱい出てきだしてるんですよ。それを私は大笑いしながら静観しておりますということで、今日の動画はね稚拙な茶番仕立ての討論会というのではなくって、アメリカを牽引する今最もホットな若い起業家たち4人がやってる番組があるんですね。そこにはRFK とかビベークとかタッカー・カールソンとかいろんなゲストを招いて忌憚なく質問をバンバン投げつけていくんですよ。で今回はトランプさんを招いて、次期大統領になったら外交はどうなのか、前回できなかったことに対する経済政策はどうなのか、関税はどうなのか、 JFK ファイルはどうなのか、いろんなことを聞いてるんですね。ですごくFOX とか CNN とか左右関係なくこの起業家として聞いてるから、本当にないんですよ、その左とか右とかが。でやっぱりこういうことをみんなが聞きたいんじゃないかなと思ってるんですね。バイアスがない質問と、この4人のうち2人はトランプさんが嫌いで、2人はトランプさんをサポートしている、政策をサポートしているっていうことなんで、なかなかズバズバ聞いてるんですね。ただ私の経済的知識があまりないので、トランプさんの言葉を訳すときってラリーとかああいうバイデンとかのあれはいいんですけど、これぐらい深い話になってくると、それ言ってることの後ろにすごくたくさんの情報があるんですよ。だからひょっとして経済にすごく精通されてる方が今日の私の訳を見ると、そこそういう意味じゃないかもよって思うかもしれないんですよ。だからもしそれがあったら教えてくださいということで、私の拙い訳を見てください。どうぞ。
You got no M&A happening right now in tech. The real estate guys, they can't get loans because the interest rates are through the roof and there's a credit crunch. So I think one of the common themes we just heard across that dinner was that it was just so hard to do business right now. And I guess maybe a good place to start would just be, what's the number one thing, or maybe the top three things that you would do to kind of get things moving again, if you're reelected?
So I'd say regulation, and taxes, okay? I gave the biggest tax cut in the history of our country, and a lot to business. It took it down from, look, as you know, they were paying companies were paying 40%, 45%, including state and city taxes in many cases. And we got it down to 21%. We'd like to get it down lower, actually, but we got it down, and the revenues were better than ever, even with the lower rate. We had a record revenues, which tells you a little bit about that. But also the regulations. And when I asked a lot of people, a lot of big people, a lot of corporate types, big corporate types, I said, if you had your choice between just the taxes or just the regulations, where did I do better? He said the regulations. I was the biggest cutter of in 4 years. I cut more regulations than anybody by far, not even close. And when I spoke to different people about the regulation versus the taxes, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, and the taxes were a massive cut, from 37, 38%, if you look at it just there, to 21%. I don't think I ever had anybody say that the taxes were more important than the regulation cuts. I made it possible to build. I made it possible to do things, to invest. I was able to get companies with a lot of money outside of the USA to bring that money back in. We cut the rate, and it was crazy. The rate was like 55%, so that means if they bring the money back, they lose half their money before they even start. But it was also impossible from a standpoint, a structural standpoint, a legal standpoint. It was very hard. And they were able to bring back, Apple's an example. They brought hundreds of billions of dollars back from other countries into the United States and invested it here. But it's very interesting because I ask the question all the time, which was more important? And almost everybody said I did an even better job. And I got the biggest tax cuts. But they found regulations, and the regulation cuts were even more effective. And that's where we had the great economy, and that's where we had the most jobs ever produced.
So there's this odd thing that happens in certain states where taxes keep going up, and then you start to see the states break, right? Productivity breaks, crime goes up, and quality of life goes down. But then people don't understand that taxation and all of those things are correlated. But do you have an idea of why that is? Like, why don't people understand universally that lower taxation is better for productivity?
Well, they don't understand it, and it's such an interesting question because you look at some of these places like Chicago and New York and LA and so many more. You know, I'd hate to even mention the three because there are worse examples than that. You look at what's happened to just crime waves. Nobody lives there except for criminals because you can't live there. You can't survive there. Physically, you can't survive there. This is a new phenomenon that's taken place, and it's incredible. Look at drugstores. Look at what's going on. Like in New York, you walk into a chain. I've seen it twice. I don't walk into too many drugstores, but I used to love it. I used to love to walk around and just look at what it is, whether it's a drugstore or department store. Into a drugstore in New York, and everything's covered up with bars and glass. And if you want just a little thing of aspirin, or if you want to buy a toothbrush, you have to wait a half an hour to get a clerk, and they open up this vault. How do you do business like that? This is a phenomenon. There's never been anything like this. They didn't used to have theft of even the most minor items. They had very little theft, relatively speaking. It's incredible when you see what's happened to the quality of life in our country. And it's happened so quickly. It's taken place so rapidly. Nobody's ever seen anything. But it's usually the Democrat-run big cities where this problem is taking place.
And they're also high tax, high regulation states.
Yeah, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And it has to be stopped.
Mr. President, can I just ask on your point about the tax cuts coupled with the tariffs that you've proposed would cause a massive, I think he called it the mother of all stagflation, where you would have kind of inflation because of the tariffs, you would have economic decline because more money would start to fund an increase in prices with tax coming down, tax cuts being put in place, and how we implement tax cuts without inflation.
I happen to be a big believer in tariffs because I think tariffs give you two things. They give you economic gain, but they also give you political gain. If a country is out of control on something having nothing to do with economics or having nothing to do with money coming in or money going out, but other things that are very political, because there are a lot of other things involved in countries, you have tremendous power over a country. Now, not everybody can say that, but we can because we're the big piggy bank. But our piggy bank is going to get smaller and smaller all the time because we're losing power. We're losing a lot of, countries on the dollar. I mean, they're going like flies. If we ever lose that, that's the equivalent of losing a war. Different currencies instead of the dollar. This is a tragedy. We cannot let that happen. With tariffs, it gives you a tremendous power, as an example, not to let that happen. You say, you want to do that? We're going to put tariffs on your product coming into the United States. But more importantly, and that's a big importance, but probably of more importance is they tax us, we tax them, reciprocal trade. I think we should have a reciprocal trade act. If China's going to charge us $100 tariff or 100% tariff on a car, then we should say, you're going to pay 100% to us. I put on a large tariff on China cars coming in, and it had a huge impact, a huge positive impact. And Biden only is doing the electric cars. I don't know why that is, because the electric cars, they're going to end up all being made in China, by the way. They're not going to be made here. Basically, it should be reciprocal.
One of the things we've talked about, President Trump, on this podcast a lot is the deficit. Under your administration, we added close to $8 trillion. Under Biden, it's going to be, paradoxically, about the same number. Seems incredibly unpopular in Washington to cut costs, but that's something we're going to need to do. What's your plan? And it looks like you're going to win a second term here. What's your plan in your second term to control spending? Can you get it under control? Is there the will in Washington to allow you to do that?
Well, the biggest thing I think is growth, because we can grow our way out. As an example, we have more liquid gold under our feet. I use the term. We have more oil. We have more wells. We have more everything than anybody else. When I started, we were number 3. Now we're number 1. We were number 1. He's going to keep it that way until after the election. If they ever won the election, there's no more oil coming out. There's no more oil. They were going down. Oil is what caused the inflation. You'd have nothing coming out. It would be a disaster. So they were intelligent enough to let the oil wells continue to go. They're not happy about it. But if this election were won by them, I can tell you right now, we would see oil go through the roof because they would really close it up. Already they're taken out of the strategic reserves just for politics because they want to try and keep the prices down as low as possible. But the big thing, we have tremendous growth potential and we have tremendous numbers of dollars that can be saved through efficiency. The way we're spending money, hundreds of billions of dollars, what Biden did with the trillions of dollars that he borrowed for COVID. Now, I had a different situation. We were getting ready to start paying off debt. We were getting ready to make a lot. We had the greatest economy in history. I had to throw a lot of money at COVID in order that we didn't end up in a 1929 type depression, which we could still end up in now because of what they've done. But I threw a lot of money in, and we ended up not in a depression. And then we ended up with a very strong, I ended up with a higher stock market than it was just previous to COVID coming in, which was pretty much of a miracle according to most. But we had to throw money out there in order to keep our country going. We would have ended up, if I didn't do that, we would have ended up in a depression. The problem is when Biden came in, he took trillions and trillions of dollars for COVID. He didn't use it for COVID. He used it for other things, but he took trillions of dollars out, and that caused a lot of the inflation. His energy policies caused inflation, and his spending, the unbelievable spending that they did caused inflation, tremendous inflation, and it's going to have an impact for a long time to come.